Downing, Demitridowning.
Your title?
Well, I used to be a prosecutor here in Southern Arizona, and for the last 4 years I've worked as a lobbyist in the medical marijuana industry, and I'm currently the organizer for the Arizona Marijuana Industry Trade Association, which is a group of dispensaries and cultivators as well as other ancillary businesses that have gotten together to develop a trade organization around the medical marijuana industry. We are not the Prop 205 campaign. We are an independent group of businesses that will be tremendously impacted by this change in legislation.
Can you start telling us a little bit about Prop 205?
Yeah, so Prop 205 is a voter initiative that's being voted on November 8th, 2016 by the voters. It was placed on the ballot by a national organization called the Marijuana Policy Project that is pushing the development and enhancement of marijuana policy across the country. It was written back in 2015, finalized sometime around May of 2015, and they collected about 280,000 signatures, which is necessary before June 2016 in order to get it on the ballot. The measure is it changes Arizona marijuana policy from a medicinal marijuana market to an adult use marijuana market. But more significantly, it's a change in the method by which our society deals with marijuana. Whether you perceive marijuana to be a problem or not, the current policy for handling marijuana, not medicinal, that's already in place, for handling adult use marijuana is a model of prohibition. Police, prosecutors, prisons, sanctions, expending the resources to go after the people, put them in jail. That is what prohibition is. That is what the drug war is. The new methodology for marijuana policy is tax and regulate. And what Prop 205 does is it sets up a structure to tax and regulate marijuana. What you do, and this is the reason why I wholeheartedly support Prop 205, what you do after you tax and regulate is your choice. And I always tell people, if they believe marijuana is the problem, tax, regulate, use the money to educate and eradicate the use through education, like we're doing with tobacco, like we kind of do with alcohol. But we should actually be doing a lot more education about the evils of alcohol. We can talk about that in a second. But so if you're opposed to marijuana use, then tax, regulate, educate, and eradicate. If you feel it's an individual choice and innocuous, well then tax and regulate, why not? You know, the people are going to be using it anyways. But what this 205 represents is a tremendous shift in the policy by which your government handles either a not problem or a problem. And that's what Proposition 205 is, and that's why I'll be supporting and voting yes. So as one of the co-authors of Prop 205, I can tell you that one of the things we did with Prop 205 was we made sure special enhancements were in there to protect some of the issues that were happening in Colorado. For example, in Prop 205, then this is entirely a misconception being pushed by the individuals who are against Prop 205. Employer rights are protected. Employers will still have the right to fire somebody for habitual marijuana use or for negligence on the workplace, just like they would alcohol. The exact same world will exist for employers. Those employer protections are written in there. Landlords, if a landlord does not want to have marijuana on the premises that they're renting, those protections are in there. It was designed specifically to protect employer rights like of companies like APS or Caterpillar or anyone else. Their rights are protected. It's going to look exactly the same as it does now. The landlord rights as well. If you're renting a house or renting a business, you have under no obligation whatsoever to allow for marijuana consumption, just like you're under no obligation to allow for alcohol consumption. You have the right to determine what happens in your own private property. Also in there are local jurisdiction control. In Arizona, we have this great political tradition of local control, of cities and counties being able to decide more issues and about zoning and how the community looks. So we wrote in there a number of things for local control regarding zoning. The public use component, also eliminated. All these things were taken as, because we learned in Colorado what some quote unquote some of the issues might be. So we wanted to make sure this was a very conservative marijuana policy. This was a very strict tax and regulate model that worked for the citizens of Arizona. Also, what we wrote in there is one of the things that we learned from the Colorado model is if you're going to have a tax and regulate system, you need a system that has a strong enforcement division that's well funded and has the powers to go out there and make sure that the citizens of Arizona who are voting for this as a compromise in marijuana policy towards tax and regulate from prohibition have the ability to collect what they've been promised. And this is one of the unique provisions of this Prop 205, is that Colorado had to invent and enhance an enforcement system after the national group came in and legalized marijuana. We have put it in there. If this passes, there will be an enforcement division in place that will help make sure that all the licensed individuals who are producing, distributing, and retailing marijuana are doing so in an accountable, effective manner. It will have marijuana cops that are out there regulating to make sure that people under the age of 21 are not using it. And we'll have individuals, law enforcement agents who can go to eradicate farmers markets or other entities that are not participating in the tax and regulate market. That way the taxpayers win. That way the greatest amount of taxes goes back to the government. And the only way that this is being legalized is because that 45 to 60 percentile that reasons through these laws and reasons through policy is looking at it and saying, you know what, we want to spend money this way rather than spend money that way. This is a much more productive model. So we have taken great care, and those of us who participate in the drafting of 205, to make sure that these specific provisions, as well as many, many others, it's 37 pages, are in place so that Arizona has a good model, an effective model for tax and regulate. On November 8th, we're looking at a giant shift from prosecutors, prisons, police, cartels, people running drugs across the marijuana across the border, car chases, all that. We're looking at a shift from that model of dealing with marijuana to a model of tax and regulate. So on October 14th, 15th, and 16th at the Phoenix Convention Center, the tax and regulate medicinal marijuana industry is hosting a giant conference, an educational conference, to show what a post-Prop 205 world will look like. So if you want to know right now where the marijuana is grown, produced, and distributed, well, you can go down to the fields of Mexico. You can talk to Juan Gamacho or whatever his name is that was, the big drug lord. You can talk to the gangs that are in northern Sonora that are bringing the marijuana up to the border, and you can talk to the young entrepreneurs that are grabbing it and taking it up to Casa Grande, to other gangs. It's a giant, complicated cartel system. Well, we call it a cartel, but it's not as organized as people think. So you can talk to them if you can find them, or you can see what a tax and regulate model looks like in Phoenix on October 15th and 16th. And you can learn, as you're learning right here in this dispensary right now, how the world could look rather than how the world does look in the alleys, in the back rooms, in the bars, and the strip clubs, and in the transporting of money and marijuana back and forth across the border. There's a new world order coming, and the people of Yuma can learn about it on October 14th, 15th, and 16th in Phoenix. That's WCCExpo2016.com.
I'm going to the back today, Gus.
So I was a prosecutor in Southern Arizona from 2000 2010, government relations. I went to high school here in Arizona. I know my state. I participated in smoking some marijuana recreationally when I was in law school back in the 90s. I understand marijuana from many, many different angles. I even did a little defense work with drug transporters between 2010 and 2011. Since 2012, I've been involved with the medical marijuana dispensaries and state license holders trying to shape the laws. One thing that I have learned, adult use is kind of a strange thing. It's like saying, should somebody drink alcohol? Should somebody smoke tobacco? I would never sit here and say, you should smoke tobacco, you should smoke alcohol, you should smoke marijuana. That's a personal choice. But one thing I can tell you is you shouldn't go to jail. Yeah, there's one thing that I know is that you shouldn't go to jail for making those kind of personal choices, especially when marijuana exists somewhere between tobacco, marijuana, alcohol. I mean, alcohol, the threat and danger that alcohol creates in our society is so far and above beyond marijuana, it's just a joke. So we should change our marijuana policy to have a tax and regulate rather than a prohibition model. In regards to the medicinal marijuana system, again, when I started in 2012, I was like, you know what? These are a bunch of hippies that are just trying to bring it back to the 60s. Medicinal marijuana is kind of a joke. I was wrong. I was 100% wrong. Now I have proof, thousands and thousands of individuals that I have met that use medicinal marijuana for effective, good purposes. Medicinal marijuana is here to stay. Marijuana is a drug that has an impact upon people's systems, and in many, 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 many ways, as long as it's not abused, as long as it's used in moderation, like any other prescription drug or any other pharmaceutical, it is a good, safer alternative for medicating. It's a natural medication. And this is something that came as a surprise to me from somebody who was coming out of the prosecutor world who thought that everybody was just, using it medicinally. Haha, that's not the case. But it really is the case that you meet people all the time in this world who literally can use it for ADD, for sleep deprivation, for glaucoma, for cancer, or all these other uses that out there that I don't necessarily have proof of, but I have firsthand proof of seeing it. I honestly think it's going to replace Ritalin. Once it's studied, narrowed down, encapsulated, there's something in this plant that will replace Ritalin. I think it's going to replace a lot of sleep aids. There's something in this plant that will replace sleep aids. And I don't understand how it works scientifically for glaucoma and cancer and all those other things. And people have firsthand evidence, but I'm not a doctor. I just know what I can see and see empirically. And I have seen this happen because I've been so involved in the medical marijuana system for the last 4 years. It's pretty cool. And an old dog can learn new tricks, and I was wrong, and I was wrong. And I was just doing my job as a prosecutor, and I did what we had to do, and it wasn't our position to think about the policy of it. But after I started thinking about the policy and learning about it, I definitely changed my mind. So I'm 100% unequivocally supportive of people's rights to medicate with marijuana. That will never change. One of the cool things about this new marijuana space is that as I'm getting educated again, you're never too old to learn new things. And that's why so much of marijuana policy is about educating. The SWCC Expo 2016 is the first time in the history of an initiative that the entire Arizona public is invited to the Phoenix Convention Center to learn what this tax and regulate model will look like, to see themselves what a post-Prop 205 world might be. So that's the SWCC Expo 2016, and we invite all people from across Arizona to attend. They can find out more about it online. What was the other thing? Members of the media, it's focused on politicians, it's focused on undecided voters, so that you can see for yourself. If you start with the premise that access to marijuana is not a problem, and anyone can access marijuana somewhere if they want to, the only good solution to your marijuana problem, if you perceive it to be a problem, is to tax and regulate, if access isn't a problem. Why are you perpetuating all the violence in the streets, all the civil and criminal justice that occurs behind the scenes? If you want people to stop being rolled up in carpets, shot in the head and left in the desert, if you want your neighbor to stop having drug raids because they're growing in their basement and that's some stuccoed home somewhere in some subdivision and it's a stash house or something, if you want all that stuff to stop, then you do it through a tax and regulate system, and you channel it through in a productive way where the taxpayers and citizens can benefit, rather than just paying off of this hopeless notion that we call the drug war, which anybody who accepts the premise that access is there anyways understands just is a broken model. And that's what this is more about than anything else. Prop 205 isn't really more about whether or not somebody should use marijuana. That's a personal choice. I've made a choice. I've been deep in the medical marijuana field for the last 4 years. I've been offered more marijuana than God knows I would ever need to consume. A whole army could consume as much marijuana as I've been offered. I don't use it. I don't accept it. I don't want it. I even stopped drinking, you know? I mean, I do a lot of yoga. That's my thing. But everybody has a choice as to how they live their lives. And so this debate is not about pushing the concept of people consuming more marijuana. No one wants that. No one wants the heavy consumption of alcohol. No one wants the heavy consumption of tobacco. No one wants the overconsumption of sugars or caffeinated beverages. But it's about liberty, and it's about how you solve your problems in a society. This is a debate about whether or not you believe prohibition is a model that works. If you believe prohibition is going to lead to the eradication of marijuana, then vote no. If you really believe that. If you believe prohibition is a broken model, vote yes. And I believe prohibition is a broken model. After 40 years of experience here in the state of Arizona, after a lot of evidence myself, some of those years I wasn't experiencing, I was just a baby, but other babies experienced too. After 40 years of experience here in the state of Arizona, I am quite certain that prohibition as a method to solving any problem is not the best approach. Education, taxation, regulation, and if you perceive it to be a problem, educate to eradicate, that is the solution. And you know what? I think that's the solution that we use in our own homes with our own family members. We don't pretend like something doesn't exist. We teach our children how to handle it. Let's give me a high five on that one. Come on. Boom. You see? She's like,